educational series. My name is John Ambrose. I am InMotion's Program and Outreach Director. Today's presentation, Power the Positive, Tools to Sustain the Warrior Mindset with Parkinson's, will be given by Dr. Sara Whittingham. When I asked her to describe this presentation, she said, quote, "We know that we need to exercise, but how can we get and stay motivated and consistent for the rest of our lives? I will discuss tools that I have learned in my roles as an athlete, a mother, a physician, and during my time in the military that have helped me to set and achieve big goals since my diagnosis of Parkinson's disease." Dr. Sara Whittingham was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2020. The first year after diagnosis, she struggled with anxiety and depression, gained 30 pounds, and felt she was on a steep downward trajectory. She was fortunate to enroll in Dr. J. Albert's research study through Cleveland Clinic, studying the effects of high cadence cycling on the progression of the disease. She quickly realized that the more she rode the bike, the better she felt. This kicked off a chain of events that led her to the finish line of the Ironman World Championships in Kona and the opportunity to compete in the 2024 U.S. Paralympic Track and Field Trials. Sara is an Air Force veteran, a wife, a mother, a physician, a lifelong athlete, and an advocate for veterans living with Parkinson's. She is also an InMotion client, a very valued member of the InMotion community. There will be some time for questions after Dr. Whittingham finishes her presentation. Please raise your hand if you do have a question and wait for the microphone to get to you before asking so everyone can hear you. Lastly, I just want to remind you that our next Ask the Expert presentation will take place on Thursday, August 22nd from 4 to 5 p.m. and it will be on Zoom. Dr. Camilla Kilbane of University Hospitals will be giving attendees a research update on Parkinson's. You can register for this program by visiting our website, beinmotion.org, or by calling us at our front desk number 342-4417. Again, thank you for joining us, and I will now turn things over to the Dr. Sara Whittingham.
Thank you. You turn this on. Is that working? Yes. Thank you, John, for the introduction. Yes, I'm Dr. Sara Whittingham, and I'm honored to be here today to talk to you about my journey so far with Parkinson's, and to hopefully give you some tools to maintain an exercise program for the long haul. So my journey, as John mentioned, I was diagnosed in 2020 with Parkinson's. I struggled for a while. I was fortunate to meet Karen Jaffe, who kind of helped set me on the right trajectory along with Jay Albert's study and made me see that I could have a fulfilling life and still accomplish big things. So that was kind of what set me on the trajectory. I've been a runner basically my whole life. I used to run with my dad growing up. I started running and competing in races when I was 6 years old, and continued to run through high school. I was state champion a couple times and ran through college, and then continued to run and got into triathlons while in medical school. I did Ironman Hawaii during my internship year, so the year after medical school, and then continued to run and compete intermittently. There were a couple breaks in between while I had kids and deployed. It was a little bit tricky to get it all in. And then in 2016, I got back into doing Ironman triathlons, and I was doing well, and then 2018 I had a really good race, and then so I said I'm going to train really hard and see if I can get back to Hawaii. And in 2019, after training hard all winter, I went to go do an Ironman, and I was 2 hours slower than I thought I would be. And so I was kind of frustrated. I didn't know why. My run was terrible, and I kind of gave it up for a while. And then COVID happened, and I was subsequently diagnosed with Parkinson's. And so looking back, I think part of the reason I was struggling to run and it became so difficult was the Parkinson's that I didn't know that I had yet. So I'm going to share, there was a lot of media coverage about the Ironman. This was a short clip that was on the Detroit local news. I think it kind of sums it up well, and then followed by some of the footage from the Ironman documentary, just to kind of give you the backstory here, just a short video.
Well, this weekend, a doctor with Parkinson's disease will be Olympia. up for the biggest race of her life, the Ironman World Championship in Hawaii.
To get a spot to Ironman Hawaii is nearly impossible.
But Sarah's story struck a chord with the organizers, and she was given the chance to compete.
I noticed tremor in my arm November of 2020, and then was subsequently diagnosed with Parkinson's.
The diagnosis was devastating for the 49-year-old who previously served in the Air Force. Now an anesthesiologist at the Cleveland Clinic.
I pictured myself being disabled in 5 to 10 years. Am I going to be able to continue to do my job?
But those worries didn't last long. Sarah discovered that exercise could help slow the progression.
I love to exercise, so that was like a hidden blessing.
From there, she started her new fitness journey, joining a cycling study for Parkinson's patients and taking part in races. Her doctor, Ben Walter, says it's amazing to see what she's accomplished.
Starting medications, getting her started, she's done very well. And one of the things that's very important for people with Parkinson's is exercise. And I think her story really exemplifies how important this is.
As Sarah reflects on how far she's come, it helped to get emotional.
When I was first diagnosed, I didn't think I would ever even be able to run a race again. And then to be able to do that on the stage where I was in the sport of triathlon was just amazing.
Just in case you don't remember what a heavy lift this is, the Ironman consists of a 2.4-mile swim, then a 112-mile bike ride, and then a 26.2-mile marathon, all back to back. Sarah says this will be the most meaningful finish line she will ever cross. The race is Saturday in Kona, Hawaii.
There are more than 2,000 athletes starting each of these races, and each has their own unique reason for being there. But what they all have in common isn't just a life-defining and hard-earned opportunity to race a world championship. They're all here to test their limits of body and mind among the world's best. For many of them, like 49-year-old Sara Whittingham, a doctor from Aurora, Ohio, this race is also a way to take control of their sibling. To say, this is what I can do. Today, no one but me gets to decide whether I can or cannot. I'll be the judge of that. It's the ultimate control. Nothing, not even a Parkinson's disease diagnosis, can stop Sara Whittingham in her mission to show what is possible with self-belief and an iron will.
So I get emotional when I watch that, so I should. Anyway, so when I was first diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, I thought about what I had learned about Parkinson's disease as a medical student 20 years earlier. And in my mind, I pictured this diagram that I had seen as a medical student. And I pictured myself as thinking that this is maybe a 70-year-old man, and over the next 10 years, that I would be what I would be looking like. And I was not seeing my future in a positive light. But after meeting other people who'd been living with Parkinson's disease and seeing the amazing things that they had accomplished, enrolling in J. Albert's study and getting back into exercising, I quickly learned that that did not need to be my future. And so he did it in 3 half Ironman triathlons. He did Ironman. After Ironman, I was able to share my story around the world, basically. I was on the Today Show, and then this documentary that Ironman did has been seen by over 500,000 people around the world. And to be able to share with them how important exercise is and to raise awareness about the important work being done here at InMotion. There was a section about InMotion in that video as well. And so this is just some of the other media. This was in the Air Force Academy Association of Graduates publication, and then a 2-page article in Women's Health magazine as well. then in addition, I've been working hard to advocate for veterans with Parkinson's disease. I found out shortly after my diagnosis that one of my Air Force Academy track teammates, who's also a physician, who also deployed to Afghanistan and was there the same time that I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease the same month as I was. And so that led us to start investigating how many other young veterans had been diagnosed with Parkinson's. And it turns out that it's quite significantly higher than the general population, and most of us don't qualify for VA disability benefits because of current policy. And so we're working to try to get research to study why this is happening so we can prevent it in future generations, and also to ensure that the veterans who do have it, if it was linked to any kind of military service, can get the benefits that they deserve. Vietnam veterans now get disability benefits for Parkinson's, and it took 50 years for that to happen. They just got that in 2021. So I'm hoping that we can advocate for our younger veterans so that they don't have to wait that long. So we all know that exercise is really important in slowing the progression of Parkinson's disease. There's all kinds of studies, we hear it over and over again, and we all know that it's something that we need to do. We know that exercise can help us manage our symptoms, motor and non-motor. And it's the only thing that has been shown to slow the progression of the disease. If we had a medication or surgery that were able to do that, we would all be fighting our physicians for them to pay for it. And yet we as Americans struggle to maintain an exercise program. And with Parkinson's, it's even more difficult and even more critical. So how do we go about accomplishing that? Because for us, it's the most important thing that we can be doing. Because we don't want this to be our future. Instead, we want to make that a little bit different. And so I made this graph of what I see as the progression of Parkinson's disease, where at the beginning, we don't even know that we have the disease for several years before diagnosis often. And then at some point, something happens and we go to the doctor and we end up getting diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So I call this about here. And so we start medications, and many of us feel better for a period of time. I felt better than I had in years after I started medications and started exercising more. And then over time, we'll slide a little bit, we'll adjust our medications, get a little bit better. And each time we slide, we may not get up quite as high as we had before, but with exercise, I believe we can flatten out the trajectory of that curve significantly. This is an example of my Unified Parkinson's Disease rating scores. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this, it's a scale of 0 to, I forget, it's like 240, where 0 are no motor symptoms and 240 are basically complete disability. And so for me, so when I was first diagnosed, my score was 16, which is the worst it's ever been since then. Now I've been on medications that helps in addition to the exercise. So after 3 months of medication, I basically cut that in more than half, down to 7. After this, I started exercising more. This is the year that this is kind of the first year here, but it kind of a little bit downward trajectory. I really had started exercising. Here I added more medications and started exercising and was able to get my score down to a 5. And then over the past year, it's kind of a slide back down to 10. A lot of it depends on the day too. Some days are better than others. So I like to change the previous slide we saw with the progression down to something a little bit different. And so this gentleman here first is somebody who probably doesn't know he has Parkinson's, maybe a little bit overweight, not exercising, and then finds out he has Parkinson's. And so then he becomes active, he makes some goals, he accomplishes those goals, makes some more goals, and eventually, in some cases, may get in the best shape of their lives. So that's a picture of me a couple years ago, a year and a half ago, at a half Ironman. So after that, we continue to exercise and set big goals. We may not be as fast as we used to, but we're still getting out there and exercising. And this next picture is a picture of Rhonda Feltz, who I had the privilege of meeting at the Boston Marathon this year. And she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 1998. The first 10 years, she gained 100 pounds. After that, she ended up getting a deep brain stimulator and got back into running. Since then, she's run over 100 marathons, including Boston Marathon, 10 times. And so for me to meet somebody who's had this disease for 25 years, who's still able to run, was incredibly inspiring to me and helped me to think more positively about my future and the importance of sticking with an exercise program. And then following that, we'll probably have to change the activities that we're able to do. We may not be able to run anymore, but maybe we'll have to change to walking or finding some sort of seated activity as we progress, but we continue to work and to stay as active as we can. One of my favorite underdog movies is Rocky, and I think of us very much like Rocky. We're underdogs in the biggest fight of our lives. Our adversary is undefeated, and we're probably going to fall down. We'll need our family and friends to help us get back up and bandage up. But if we work hard, we'll be able to go the distance and have been worthy adversaries. So I'm going to go over some of the tools that I've learned throughout my life that have gotten me here. And so where do I start with this? So the first thing is figuring out what kind of exercises we need to be doing. And most of you have probably already seen this handout from the Parkinson's Foundation, but it's important to do a variety of different types of exercises, not doing the same thing all of the time. So some sort of aerobic activity, so cycling or something that gets your heart rate up, rowing, anything like that, strength training, balance, agility, and multitasking, and stretching. So it's important to do a variety of things. It's also important to find something that you like to do, because if it's not something that you enjoy doing, you're not going to keep doing it, and so then what's the point? So it's really important to find something that you enjoy, and maybe something that you have friends that are doing as well that can help you stick with the program. So I made a list to just kind of brainstorm some things that came to my mind. There's a lot more, and you can kind of make up your own if you wanted to. So I've learned a lot of lessons over the years. First, as a role as a patient, since I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, I listened to all of Michael J. Fox's audiobooks, and I found that very helpful. And just hearing his optimism, and I learned a lot from other people with Parkinson's. I've learned a lot in my role as a mother, as a physician, as an athlete, and also in the military. And for me, the most important thing was learning the power of gratitude and learning the importance of finding something each day for which to be grateful. And I like to quote Michael J. Fox on this when he says that gratitude makes optimism sustainable. Because if you can find something for which you're grateful for, and see the silver lining in any situation, it makes everything easier. The next tool is to think of yourself as the hero of your story. Picture yourself as somebody who's writing a book or a movie about you. And the most interesting movies, the most interesting heroes have to overcome some sort of adversity. And we've all been given this gift of an adversity that we get to overcome. It gives us an opportunity to be somebody that our family and friends cheer for. And so when it's hard and you're struggling, think of what you would want your hero to do. Would you want them to stand up and fight? Or just say, oh, that's a bad day, I'll just go back to bed. So I like, when things get tough, I like to kind of think, if somebody were writing my story, what would I want that to be? So when you get up in the morning and you look in the mirror, look at the things that make you strong, the wisdom in your eyes, how strong you are. Maybe if you're brushing your teeth and you don't have to even do the work because your hand's shaking so much already, find a way to laugh at the things and focus on the good things and your strengths. Another tool I learned from one of my friends from the Air Force Academy, Sema, who's a world-class CrossFit athlete and was taking a class on how to coach mental toughness. And I volunteered to be her guinea pig in this training. And one of the activities she had me do was to make a list of everything in my life that I could think of that I had accomplished, no matter how big or small, over the course of a couple weeks. And so it can be anything, this is kind of a few things I had come up with, like raising 2 incredible daughters, one of them is here today, survived the Air Force Academy, one got second in the middle school spelling bee. It's anything that you can think of that you've accomplished in your life over the course of a couple weeks, and write it down. And once you look back at that list, you'll realize that you're already well on your way, and it'll help you to think more positively about what you can accomplish because you've already accomplished all of these things. So actually taking the time to write all of that down and going back and looking at it occasionally if you're having a hard day or kind of thinking badly about yourself, to have that handy. The next tool I learned in my role as a mother. When we lived in Utah, we had my 2 teenage stepchildren and my 2 toddlers living under the same roof, and nobody was happy. There was a lot of conflict. and Cindy can attest to that. And so I asked one of my friends on one of my Air Force Reserve weekends, who's a social worker, and his civilian job was working at a home for troubled teens. And so I asked him for his advice. And he recommended a book called Parenting Teens with Love and Logic. And the premise of this book seemed completely counterintuitive to my husband and I, who had spent a lot of time in the military, where bad behavior is immediately corrected. The premise of the book was to learn to ignore the negative and focus on the positive and catch your children being good. And that over time, the behaviors to which you're paying attention and focusing on become more prevalent, and the behaviors that you're ignoring will eventually go away. Well, we didn't really think it would work, but we tried it anyways because nothing else was working. And I was amazed. It was a little bit difficult to find things to praise initially, but with some creativity, found some things to praise. And over time, it became easier and easier. And it took a lot less energy than fighting the battles by focusing on the positive and encouraging the good behavior. So in Parkinson's, instead of thinking about the bad things about it, try to put those out of your mind, because there's no point. There's nothing that's going to change if you're thinking about the bad things. Instead, focus your energy on all the positive things that it's brought to your life. The friends, sorry, I get emotional. The friends that you have here and the positive things, because that's what's going to make the difference. And those are the things that you're going to keep doing more of, instead of focusing on the things that are just wasting energy and not getting you anywhere. And so, and to translate this into exercise, focus on the things that you like doing about each activity. So another tool that my friend in my mental toughness training had me do was to take the activities that I do, the exercise that I do, and think about each thing that I like about doing that activity. So that when it's time to get up to go to the pool at 5:30 in the morning, I can think about the things I like about swimming instead of thinking about all the things I don't like. So if I'm doubting myself, I'll think, oh wow, I really like it when I get out of the pool and get in the warm shower, and thinking all the things I have to look forward to. Or when I'm struggling to push myself to go a little bit further, I can think back to my list of the things that I like. And so again, you can be creative with this too, because sometimes it's hard to think of things you like. So like for biking, like I like the sound that the pedals make when I clip into my bike, when I clip into my pedals. Or I love, let's see, like when I'm swimming, like feeling the water go under my swim cap when I get in the pool. So like if you're going for a walk, think about, I like listening to the birds chirp. So you can focus on some things that you like on that walk instead of the fact that you might be a little bit uncomfortable. The next thing I learned is called the peak end rule in psychology. And I had kind of figured this out on my own and then later read about it. And so when we lived in Utah, we lived at the top of a very big hill, which meant that anytime I went for a run, I would have to finish that bike ride or run by going up a big hill. And so I was always tired and felt not like I wasn't very strong going up the hill. And it became more and more difficult to get out the door to go for a run. And so one day I decided that I would drive down to the bottom of the hill and start and finish my run at the bottom of the hill. And so that the last mile of my run would be going downhill. So even though I was running the same loop, I was finishing feeling fast and strong and feeling like I was doing very well. And so I began to look back on that experience as something favorable and something that I wanted to do over and over again. The peak end rule study showed that when people look back at an experience, what they remember most is the end of that experience. And if there was a peak emotional point in that experience, those are the two parts of it that they'll remember most. So an example of that would be if you're watching a football game and your favorite team is losing and you're sitting there all afternoon, angry, red in the face, yelling at the TV and not having a good time. And then the last 3 minutes of the game, they come back and win. The next day, when you look back at watching that fun afternoon you had watching football, you think about how awesome the game was and what a great game it was, even though you were completely miserable for 3 hours and really only enjoyed the last 5 minutes of it. So the same thing comes with exercise. You could have a really hard workout, a really hard run. For example, Ironman, I was suffering most of the day. But when I look back on the experience, I think about the finish line and think about that experience most when I think about that, which makes me want to sign up and do more and do crazy things like that. So when you pick out an activity that you like to do, tie it to something fun at the end. So if it's going out to coffee with your friends after a hard workout here at InMotion, or doing something, make it fun at the very end, so that when you look back on it, you'll say, oh yeah, I want to go do that, because then I get to go get coffee afterwards, or something. Make sure you finish every workout in a positive way. So the next tool I learned in the military. I went to the Air Force Academy, and freshman cadets get yelled at a lot for everything. Sometimes it's for something that's completely silly. Sometimes you screw something up, but you're basically going to expect to get yelled at all the time. And the expectation was that if you heard one of your classmates was getting yelled at out in the hallway, that you would stop whatever you were doing and you would go stand by their side, and you would get yelled at with them. And if they had to do push-ups, you got down and did push-ups with them. And then later on, we would go back and we'd laugh at the ridiculousness of it all and appreciate it. And so going through difficult things and having hard experiences is a lot easier and a lot more fun if you're doing it with other people. When I deployed to Afghanistan, when I got there were several of my friends from both medical school and the Air Force Academy. And so to be there, going through it with them, they had left kids at home and were struggling with that as well. But to be there with going through the same thing made it actually an experience that was not as miserable as it could have been. It was actually had some fun when I was over there. So these are a few pictures as examples. This top picture is me and my roommate Vern getting yelled at. I'm rocking the BCGs, or birth control glasses, as they're known as. This is my friend Rita and I getting ready to board the airplane to go jump out of airplanes for parachute training. And having her by my side made it a lot easier. And this last picture are my friends Sierra and Jenna, who were also on the Air Force Academy track team with me, who came to Kona to cheer me on. And Jenna is the physician I had mentioned before that also has Parkinson's disease and is working with me to advocate for veterans. So going through difficult things with other people makes it a lot more fun. When I was at the Boston Marathon in April, I had the opportunity to get classified as a para-athlete and run in the para-athlete division. And they have a coordination and para division, which was made up of all Parkinson's people with Parkinson's. So everybody in these pictures has Parkinson's disease and ran the Boston Marathon. So it's really cool to see other people and learn from them about some of the tricks that they've got to learn to be able to continue to run over the long haul, such as cramping in their feet or their toes curling under, and learn some tools and tricks for them. So that was really great. And this is another picture of Rhonda with all of her Boston Marathon medals. So the next tool I'm going to talk about is learning to set achievable goals. So it's really important to set goals that you can achieve, because when you're setting achievable goals, you're looking at your future in a positive way, in a world where you accomplish those goals. And a lot of times people make the mistake when they're setting goals to set vague goals, like I'm going to start exercising more, or I'm going to go to try to get to InMotion more, or I'm going to do this. But that's not really helpful. You need to set goals that are specific, and you can say, yes, I have achieved this specific goal in a particular time. So a lot of you have probably seen this acronym, the SMART acronym for goals. But our goals need to be specific. So if right now you're able to walk a mile a day, or you're able to walk to the mailbox and back, make the goal that a week from now, or over the next week, you're going to try to walk a block and back. And make a goal that, I'm going to try to do that 3 times next week. Or 2 months from now, I want to run a 5K or walk a 5K, or be ready for the Pals InMotion 5K event in a couple weeks. But make a goal that has a specific time, something that you can achieve and say, yes, I accomplished this goal, and can be measured. And so I like to set one big goal for the year, like maybe such as Ironman, or running the Boston Marathon, or something that is a big goal, and then set some intermediate goals along the way to help me get there. So if, for example, if I'm training for a marathon, I might set a goal to run a 5K, 10 months before that, and maybe a goal to run a 10K, a couple months after that, and then maybe a half marathon a few months before that. So I have some intermediate steps to get to my big goal. And it's important to celebrate every time you achieve a goal, because that is an accomplishment, and it's something that's going to make you want to keep going and going and going. And so by setting goals, we're thinking about a future in which we accomplish those, and thinking of our futures in a positive way. So at the Boston Marathon, like I said, I was able to get classified by the U.S. Olympic Committee as a para-athlete. And it was the first year that they had prize money for the para-athletes, so that was pretty cool. So I ended up I got second in my division. There was a woman there who's an amazing runner. She's actually the same age as I am, and we were diagnosed with Parkinson's the same year, but she beat me. But hopefully next year we'll have a good rivalry going. But after that, the thought occurred to me that the Paralympics were coming up. So I had the thought that, gee, I wonder if I could run in the Paralympic trials. And so I looked into it, and the only events they had for my classification of para-athletes, which was a T36, so basically somebody with coordination impairment and hypertonia or stiffness on both sides of my body. And the only events they had for my classification were the 100-meter dash and the 200-meter dash. Well, I'm a distance runner, and I never used starting blocks or ever run that far. But I said, why not? Let's see if I can do it. So I looked at the times that it would take to qualify, and I said, that's probably achievable for me. And I looked at all the hoops I would have to jump through, and I realized that I had missed some deadlines as far as jumping through all the hoops, but they decided to let me run anyways. But I wouldn't be eligible for a para slot even if I did run really fast. So I was able to qualify for the Paralympic trials in the 100 meters and 200 meters. And there was only one other woman in the race. This is Jordan. She was the other athlete in my classification at the Paralympics. She's 24 years old and has mild cerebral palsy. I mean, 50 years old, so I'm like twice her age and a little bit stiff. So we both ran at 200 meters. I'll show you a video of the race here. It's kind of amusing.
Adversity over your career, but Sara has really.
This was on Peacock, so NBC.
Sport to maintain a healthy and pretty prolific active lifestyle. Trying to go stride for stride, and Wire maybe slightly behind Whittingham here as Whittingham begins to pull away, but now struggling at home is held down on the track as Wire maneuvers around. Whittingham is backing up and across the line, but 10 meters from the finish.
Like that experience, that life experience of pivoting to a new sport can be really challenging, and having those nerves of a big event.
Okay, it's slow motion. So even though you set goals, things may not always turn out as you wanted to, and it's important to be able to laugh at those and move forward. I'm not sure what happened there. I think I took a step that was I tried to accelerate, and my left leg didn't accelerate as fast as it should have, and I lost my balance is what I think happened there. But it was a great experience, and I get to laugh at that and show everybody that, yes, things don't always go as planned, but I still learned a lot, and look back on that as a good experience and something that I might want to do again. So that kind of ties into finding the humor in our faults. And so it's important to be able to laugh at our faults and the things that make us unique. I think too many people try to hide their weaknesses and their faults, and that puts you in a place where you're thinking about those faults more often. Instead, try to just put them aside. Yep, that is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it, but I'm going to focus on this instead. And being able to laugh at those things and say, yeah, my arm shakes a lot, or whatever, find the things that you might be self-conscious about that there's really nothing you can do about. I find it easier just to own it and kind of make a joke, make light of it, and move on in a positive direction. And so another crazy example of that, a couple years ago, we were on vacation, and I had paddleboarded before. I never really had any problems with it, but this is probably the first time I had tried since my diagnosis with Parkinson's. And my kids would sit on the beach and laugh at me trying to get up on the paddleboard. And they took videos over and over again of me laughing, waiting for me to fall. And so this is one such example. You see, I'm really stiff. I'm like trying to use the oar to stabilize myself because I can't balance. And so my kids are sitting on the beach laughing at me, trying to do this for hours. So yeah, so that was amusing for everybody. Everybody had a good time looking at me, laughing. And so I came back home and I practiced. I worked on some balance exercises. I got one of the Bosu balls and practiced. And after some practice, this is what I was able to do before our next trip back. My dog is not at all impressed. She's kind of bored, but so I practiced. And so then when we went back the next year, I was amazed at how easily I was able to get up on the paddleboard, and my kids were disappointed that they didn't get to laugh at me falling over again and again. But that experience taught me that by laughing at myself and finding the amusement in things, it kind of made me want to do better, and made me think positively about it. And then eventually I was able to accomplish that. It also taught me how we talk about neuroplasticity, and that we have brain cells that are dying essentially. That's what's happening. But we can retrain our brains to make up for those things. And so I'm amazed at how many, when I find my weaknesses, that by working and practicing on those specific things, how quickly some of that comes back. And so, for example, here at InMotion, I really like the assessments that they do every 6 months, because it helps show me what my weaknesses are that I may not know otherwise, and gives me a direction to work on for that period of time moving forward. Usually, sometimes I'm surprised. For example, I went to a Parkinson-specific physical therapy, and they had me on the treadmill, like turning from side to side, pushing buttons as I was walking, and it was way harder than I thought it would be. But by practicing a couple of times, I was able to do that a lot more easily as well. But I didn't even realize that I couldn't turn my head side to side and walk without feeling like I was going to fall over before I started practicing that. So the next tool I'm going to talk about, I learned in my role as a physician. So I'm an anesthesiologist, and so I see people coming in for something which in a lot of cases is the scariest thing that they've done in their lives. I take care a lot of teenagers at an orthopedic center. It's a lot of times the first time that they've had surgery. And I've noticed over time that some people come in for surgery very optimistic about how things are going, and they think everything's going to go well and they're going to do great. And then other people come in and are convinced that nothing ever goes well for them, that nobody knows what they're doing, and everything's just going to go wrong. And so the optimist, even if it takes 15 times to get the IV, and not everything goes perfectly, they're grateful that she got the IV in, and they're super happy as they're rolling out, everything went great. As opposed to the pessimist who you didn't put the IV exactly where they wanted it, and the tape hurt when it came off, and they're focusing on all the negative things, and nobody knows what they're doing because they put the tape where there's hair on my arm, and they're focusing on specific bad things. And I've often wondered if the outcomes of the surgical outcomes of people who think positively are better than the ones that think negatively. So I looked to see if anybody had studied that, and I didn't find anything about that, but I did find that there had been quite a bit of research studying the outcomes of people with cancer, chronic pain, and strokes, looking to see at the long-term outcomes of those who thought positively about their future versus those who did not. And there's quite a bit of evidence that showed that there were lower cortisol levels, lower inflammatory markers, and the people who thought positively about their future, even when adjusted for their level of severity of illness to begin with, lived longer and were in better physical shape than those who did not. So a lot of times, I think, the people for surgery, the outcome of the day is almost always exactly what they thought it would be going into it. The people who come in thinking everything's going to go great, everything's awesome, leave feeling exactly that way, even if maybe everything wasn't perfect. Whereas the people who come in thinking, oh my gosh, nobody knows what they're doing, are perseverating on whatever went wrong as they're leaving, even though everything went as well as it could have. And there's people in the middle of that too. A lot of people come in and just go with the flow and do what they have to do and get on with it. But I think a lot of us don't appreciate how important it is. What we think is going to happen ends up being what actually happens in our perception of that. So this is, And so the last tool, and this is the easiest, is the off season. So even professional athletes take time off every year. There's no sport where people are training 100% year round. There's time off every year to recover, let your bodies regroup, let your mind take a break, and take some time to to plan for the following year and make plans for the following year. So for me, after I finish a big race like a marathon or an Ironman, I'll take a month where don't stop working out completely, but scale way back and maybe do something a little bit different or that's not so stressful on my body as running or doing triathlons. So during that time, I'm just my body's healing, my mind's resting, so that when it is time to start training again, I can do that with more intensity. If I just train all the time, it's easy to get in a rut where you're not really making any big improvements because you're just going and going and going and going. Professional football players, after the season's over, they take a break and then start again for the preseason each year. And every professional athlete does that. So I just start after I've given some other talks in the past, and people have a lot of questions about where they can find more information about my the media appearances and my story. And I'm also in some Facebook groups that people share their journeys, and people pick each other's brains about solving various problems with Parkinson's. For example, I posted that I feel like my shoulders are curling forward after, and I hunch over after I've been riding the bike a lot. And so people suggested that I try rowing more to even that out, and some other exercises to stretch. And so there's a huge amount of resources on these Facebook groups that is really hard to not organized. And so I wanted to put together a website that organized all of that in a way that is more accessible to everybody, because I couldn't really find anything otherwise. And so I just this week started to put this together, so it's still really rough, but I wanted to include stories about different people with Parkinson's who had started exercising in various levels, and I've been able to get a few stories in there, and wanted to share that was coming around. That it's live, but it's not like 100% together yet. But if any of you would like to look at it and share your stories on it, right now the people that I have shared their stories on are kind of crazy like me, and were doing Ironmans before they were even diagnosed with Parkinson's, and so they're like superstar achievers. But I really want to include stories of people who maybe weren't exercising at all before Parkinson's and have started exercising and been able to get in better shape, and maybe are able to walk a 5K now when they couldn't even walk a mile before that. So there's a couple, these are just some of the my media appearances. I did give a talk at NeoMed about my advocacy for veterans, and there was a question and answer session that had a lot of questions about my specific journey with Parkinson's as well. So I'd like to thank Northeast Ohio Medical University for some of the video footage, and also Ironman also for the video footage. And that is all. Yeah, this is the website too I was putting up. So I had put just a couple pages with people's journeys so far. I got a message today from somebody from the Netherlands who posted his picture. Let's see, is it not going? So yeah. So yeah, just different people and their journeys. This guy's had Parkinson's for 10 years in the Netherlands. This woman's been doing Everesting, which I had never heard of, but basically she climbs Whistler like 5 or 6 times in the course of 36 hours and rides the gondola down until she's climbed 29,000 feet. She's done that 3 times since she was diagnosed. So just different stories of things that people are doing, because I think it's fun to get creative ideas of things to do, and just be inspired by seeing other people with Parkinson's going out and doing crazy things. There's a guy in Norway who posts on Facebook, he rides his mountain bike down frozen creek beds in the wintertime. And like just crazy things like that. I'm like, I would never think to do that. That's pretty cool. But it's kind of fun to see some of the things that people do. So I would love to share any stories if you're willing to do that on there as well. And I'm also trying to use it as a resource too that people can go to learn more about Parkinson's, and maybe some tools for solving different, managing different symptoms as well. Are there any questions?
Sarah, thank you very, very much. That was wonderful. I'm going to turn the microphone up a little bit because I can't. Can you hear me better now? Okay. Just an amazing presentation. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Anybody have questions? Rob?
Thanks, John. obviously a very inspiring story. My question is around medication and preparing to exercise. Did you change any of your schedules, your dosage, in preparation for, for
Yeah.
both training and competing?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's been kind of a work in progress, trying to figure it out. With the half Ironmans, I would take my normal morning dose of Cinemet, and then my next dose would normally be like early afternoon, but I would take it right after the swim, so probably like 10 earlier in the morning. And then I would take another dose like 3 hours later. And I found that when I am exercising a lot, I feel like I do need a bit more. I did my next race. I was really stiff coming off the bike and into the run, and so I took the dose that I was planning to, and I was still really stiff. So I carry a little vial of medication around my neck when I run, and so I took some more, and I don't think it was this Parkinson's because I ended up getting really nauseous because I think I went too much. So at Ironman, I kind of tried to stick with my normal schedule. And I noticed about 80 miles into the bike, my bike cadence slowed down to 65. I had been trying to cycle at a rate of 80 to 90 strokes per minute, and I couldn't get my rate above 60, 65. And so that was a clue to me that I was behind on my medication. And that after I stopped and took some medication, that got better over time. So I'm still kind of learning the nuances of that. And that's one thing I kind of learned to keep an eye on is my bike cadence. To know when it's time for that. Anyways, it's kind of a work in progress. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Anyone else have any other questions? Wendy.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So motivational. So most of us that I've met here at InMotion aren't athletes, never
Right.
were athletes, didn't have any where to start from or
Right.
past memory of, hey, how do you tackle these goals that you're trying to make?
Mhm.
So for us mere mortals, and we're very proud of you, but as I say, we are largely not athletes. Speaking for myself. So where do you start?
Yeah. So I mean, I think the first thing to do is start with figuring out what you can do now. I mean, if you're think what the most active thing that you do on your day-to-day basis is. Is it going to the grocery store and walking around the store for a half an hour, or walking the dog, or just sit down and think of what can I do right now? What activity am I doing now? And then think, okay, well, what could I possibly do? If I'm going to the store and walking around for 20 minutes, then you're probably walking close to a mile doing that just by walking around. So maybe try to go for a walk and see if you can go a mile. And if that feels okay, maybe the next day try to go a little bit further. And once you kind of figure out what you can do, then set some goals, some bigger goals. So if you're able to walk a mile now, maybe a month from now, your goal is to be able to walk 2 miles. And then if you can do that, well, you can probably do a 5K. You can probably walk a 5K. So maybe look, 2 months, look online and see if you can find a 5K. And even better if you sign up for it in advance, because now you're committed, and put the money down and maybe find a friend that's going to do it with you. So if you don't show up, there's like, hey, I signed up for this race. Why aren't you here? Somebody that's going to hold you accountable to do that as well. So I think just by kind of you got to figure out where you are now to figure out where you want to be. And then, once you do the 5K and that was super fun and you did it with some friends, and think, okay, well, I did that and, it basically tripled what I was able to do. Maybe I could, maybe try to run part of it next time, or, try to think of what the next step might be for you based on what you're able to do. If you all have limitations, maybe sore knees, sore hips, you can't, aren't able to run. But there's, cycling classes, you may not be able to work the whole class, but maybe, do parts, what you can, and then make the goal, maybe next time we're gonna be able to do a little bit longer, and just make it a specific goal. Like, if right now I'm able to ride the bike for 10 minutes without stopping, next week I wanna be able to maybe work that up to doing 20, and make intermediate goals. And then as you kind of figure out where you are, then you can try to make something even bigger for like a year from now. Like, wow, maybe a year from now I can do the whole class without stopping, and and work towards that. And then once you do that, celebrate it. Say, wow, I did that. So, yeah.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? Yeah.
Thank you. I've read a lot about you, and it's wonderful to meet you in person. I have a question. What advice words of wisdom would you have for care partners?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I had added a care partner section on here. And right now it says, I know nothing about this. So if care partners would want to know what questions you might want to ask or know something about. But for me, I think just being there and encouraging me to exercise. I'm very fortunate that my husband also does triathlons. And so, that's kind of what got me back into it to begin with, because he had already signed up for a triathlon in July of 2022. And when he signed up, he had said, "Are you going to sign up?" I was like, "Oh, there's no way I can do a triathlon." And then 4 months later, had been cycling more, and I realized, maybe I could do that. And so by him, being interested in that helped me a lot. And I know not everybody is fortunate to have a spouse that's super active and is going to push them. But offering to exercise with them, because it's going to, we all are aging, and whether or not you have Parkinson's, exercise is going to help everybody. And so you can set goals together. Your care partner is going to benefit from the exercise just almost as much, or maybe more, sometimes more, than the person with Parkinson's. And we know that exercise helps our heart, our brain, our whole bodies, and makes it less likely to have falls. Everybody, we're all aging. So make those goals together. Because if you're out there doing it together, it's a lot more fun. You're more likely to keep each other accountable. And I think I prefer that than people feeling sorry for me or like trying to hey, why didn't you go work out today? Well, come work out with me, and to do that together. I think is probably the best thing a care partner could do from my perspective. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Can I get one more?
Yeah.
So you're the athlete and all these other wonderful things.
Crazy.
Good crazy. What do you do when you hit that wall of fatigue? Especially those of us who are older than you.
Yeah.
You've got the natural aging, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
You just hit that wall.
Yeah, and it is hard, and some days are better than others, and you sometimes just have to roll with it. There are days where I plan to go out for a 6-mile run, and I start running, and I just don't have it today. I'm not feeling it. And don't be hard on yourself. It's just okay. I don't have it today. Maybe I'll feel better tomorrow. And I think not taking it super seriously, because I think once you start getting down on yourself, it's hard to get back out there and do it again. So. And the fact that you made it out the door to try to go for a run, I see that as a victory. I tried to do it today and I just didn't have it, and I ended up going for a walk instead. And it was a nice day, and I, got to, say hi to the neighbors or, and do all of that. So even when it's hard or you're tired, you try to find something that's positive about it. And if you don't do what you planned to set out to do that day, that's fine. You're not going to feel 100% every day. Nobody really does. And with Parkinson's, you really don't know what's, some days I'll go out to go for a run and I feel awful and I, run like 100 yards and I'm like, oh, this is hard today. So I'll try to walk for a bit and say, okay, maybe I'll try again. And then, well, that's not going to happen. So maybe if I have time later, I might try to get on the bike, or I'll just say, oh, maybe I'll feel better tomorrow and go from there. But just learn to be patient with yourself, because nobody's going to feel good every day, and don't be too hard on yourself if you don't. It's okay to take a week off if you're not feeling well, or until you're stop and take that time to regroup and think, okay, what can I do next? Or maybe get a friend and come up with something together. So I think just don't be too hard on yourself if you can't do something all the time, because nobody can do that.
All right, Sarah, thank you so much for being here, for your presentation. Very inspiring, and I'm sure everyone just really enjoyed it. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
It's an honor.
Thank you all for being here. Have a great rest of your evening.